for joining me this time and making time for my presentation. As you guys know, my name is Francis. So I'm going to present today about building a visitation ministry that cares. So I think it's very important for every church to have this, as Jesus tells us to love people and be there for them. So a visitor attends your church, through worship, but we want to be there for them by warm greetings, by feeling like they are seen within the church. And I think too as well, it's important that we follow up with new people that visit the church. Would you guys agree? Yes. Yeah, it's really important. So such as well visitors there's some visitors that never return, and that's kind of sad. If we're a church that want to be, showing God's love and welcoming people to the church, but we're not following up with them. So that's what's going to be my presentation today, the importance of having a visitation ministry in churches. So first, we want to see what is the problem. And the problem is that visitors that actually come back to church is actually quite low, which that's kind of sad. So while nearly 90% of guests will return if follow up the same day. So if a church follow ups with a visitor, they will show up again. That's 99% if the follow up is right there in that day. And only about 10% of the first time visitors end up becoming regular attendings. So out of 100%, 90% don't even show back. It's only 10%. The follow-up is rare. So this study, my resources are from church leadership. It shows that churches around, the United States, it's really rare if they follow up when a new visitor comes. And here we were all once new visitors at church. So raise your hand if someone follow up with you. Yeah, I hope, yeah. So, and maybe some of you guys didn't, maybe at an old church you went to. I think our church does this really good, that they follow up when we have a new visitor. But follow-up is rare, how I said, in some churches. So in one survey, only 24% of visitors receive any follow-up in 30 days. So that's only 24%. And also to the lack of intentional follow-up translate to loss of opportunity of a person to know Christ, opportunity to use their gifts and talents, loss of opportunity to find community. So there's a need in the church, of all the churches, there's a need for a visitation program because Jesus calls us to love people, to care for them, to build community within the church. And two, there's a need because the statistics are showing that it's really low when churches follow up. So we need a solution. So if we see that there's a problem and the problem is the lack of follow-ups in the church, we need a solution. So I did 5 steps for a solution. The first one is the prompt, personal, pleasant follow-up, which that means you contact the person that visited the churches 24 hours in that same day. This program is to find a solution for the follow-up. So within 24 hours, it shows that 85% will return. Within 72 hours, 60% would return. And after a week, it shows that 15% will show up. So this is if you're prompt to it, if you're personal, of course being that personal, and then the pleasant follow-up. So those are some statistics. So if you contact within the 24 hours, it's 85. Within 72, it's 60. And within a week, it's 15%. The next solution is the use servants, not pastor. While I was doing my research, this one stood out to me a lot because sometimes we think like, well, I'm not the pastor, so I shouldn't welcome new people or I shouldn't follow up. But I think God calls us as servants to serve Him with our gifts and talents. So it shows that even servants that are like servidores del Señor, servants, follow up. It shows that people would actually come more to the church because they feel that love, that personal love of like, hey, this person has a job as well. maybe this person gave their life to the Lord, not long ago, but they feel loved and cared for if a servant goes. As well, the pastor is encouraged. I think our pastor does really good, or other church pastors. But it does show that as a servant of Christ, when we personally do a follow-up, it's actually better. So that's another solution too. That is not just the pastor, but servants would join the team for the visiting team. So the next one, the second one, is the 3 core follow-up principle. So that's the 3 P's on a follow-up principle. Is prompt, you reach out quickly. So that's the goal, that a church wouldn't take more than a week to follow up. The second one is personal. So you get along with the person, you go personal with them. And the last one is pleasant. So you welcome tone, you're warm, you make the visitation person that's visiting the church feel welcome. So those are the 3 P's. The number 4 is the structural follow-up step. So first, visit, you deliver a lasting gift, which I think it's beautiful that our church does this. They have like the little tacita with the goodies. So I think that's beautiful that they do that. But soon after their visit. And then the second is you follow up with the call within 48 hours. So if we have a visitation team at the churches, they would do the first visit, give a gift. The second one would be a call within 24 to 48 hours, which return would be 95%, when we do these steps. And the last step would be entering the visitor's info into a tracking system to connect into groups or ministry. So as the body of Christ, we have different gifts and talents. So when someone visits and we follow up with them, we plug them into church. What are their gifts? What are their talents to be involved? And that would give them a sense of belonging at the church. And then the last one, we want to transform to a community. So study shows that once a guest returns 3 to 4 times, that all of us here have returned 3 to 4 times, the likelihood of a membership is 60%. So they feel a belonging, so they become a member. And this is why it's so important to have a visitation ministry at a church. The follow-ups are important. And then going on to my next slide, so we vision this. So let's vision if we had a visitation ministry in every church. The need for this is that there's a positive outcomes. So visitors feel welcome, they follow up, they begin to develop relationship. We have the high return rates of 85%. First-time visitors at a church, they return back, they become members. And over time, these visitors move from attendance to involvement to spiritual growth. And that's what we want, people to come to know Jesus, people to grow spiritually. At our church, we have the discipulados, 5 of them, because we want them to grow spiritually and eventually become a member of the church. So those are the positive. If we have this team at every church, this would be a great outcome. And then just some negative things, if we don't have a visitation ministry at churches, visitors feel like they're unseen, they're unnoticed, they're unvalued. Because as people, that's how we feel. We want community, we long for love, we long for community. So if we don't have a visitation team, people just feel unseen. And then also to a negative scenario is that most never return, and the mission of us sharing Christ, the mission of us becoming the body of Christ is lost. And then also to that disconnect from the congregation. We're called to go and make disciples as Christians. And if we don't follow up with people, we're not doing that. So that's important. And then my last slide, which is the last point of why we need a visitation team. It's the action. So action steps is we, as a servant, we have a visitation team. So we involve volunteers, not just staff, not just the pastor, but people that have a longing to want to welcome new people. So we have a solid team, a lady visitation team. We train the team on being functional, personal, and pleasant and follow-ups. So we train the team with the 3 P's, how I said earlier. We implement the timeline, so first-time visitors, we contact them 24 hours. We have a welcome table for them. We have the gift, that our church does pretty good on that. And then the 4th one, we track and nurture a relationship. So not just the first time we meet them, we give them the gift and we never see them again, but we track and we build a relationship. You use a simple tracking system to monitor each visitor journey over 90 days. So within 3 months, the hope is that after they would want to become a member at the church. And as all of us here were one time new, I was new one time, at Familia Semilla, I felt welcome, I felt loved, I felt like I had a follow-up, and I was able to get connected. And then also too, as we're attracting relationships, we introduce visitors to groups to align their interests. So I think it's important, like how I was connected with Juan and Jackie, and I joined this Bible study. The same we should do with visitors. That's why it's so important to have a visitation ministry, so they could feel plugged into church. Especially because some churches are big, like ours is pretty big, so a visitation team is so important. And then the 5th one, we evaluate, refine, and repeat. So we monitor returns rates, feedback, and involvement. Of course, we adjust because every season of time could look different. But just how to make this team, this ministry at church, just more effective. But yeah, so this is my presentation of why every church needs a visitation team. We saw the positive, as we're called as Christians to follow up, so they could get plugged in, so they could feel value. And then we saw the negative too. If we don't have a visitation team, they never come up, they're never plugged in, they never hear the gospel. So our action is that we want 85% of new people to join the church. We don't want to be that 90% that they never show up. But yeah, thank you guys so much for this time, for allowing me to share with you guys. Thank you.